Hello. All right. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks you all for joining us on this conversation today. The backstory behind this is really, the backstory behind this actually starts about a year ago for me personally. And I was at a point in my life where, honestly, I just needed to prioritize my own physical and mental health. Family history of heart disease, high cholesterol, diabetes, the whole gamut, coming from the Filipino side of myself, but also bouts of depression and significant weight gain. All this kind of stuff was just happening at one time. It kind of culminated at this point where I found myself in the ER. And as a 36-year-old, somewhat feeling healthy male, it was just more of a shock to me in my body. And in parallel to that, there was a number of close family members that also had passed away at the same time when I was in the ER, and one of my best friends from college, near-death experience as well from a health perspective. And so it was this weird, like, lightning bolt that hit me at one time in my life, but I was just so appreciative to also go through that and have a perspective at such a young age to try to make some positive changes for myself. And so that's led to a number of changes in my life since then, one of them being leaving the company I was at for the last 10 years, and that was Amazon. And I ended up writing this LinkedIn post about just my changes in my health and also my career. And at that moment, that's actually how I first really got connected with Aaron. Aaron had reached out to me and kind of out of the blue. We hadn't really spoken much prior to that. And it was a simple, just like check-in. It was, hey, just want to see how you're doing. I would love to, if you want to talk, I'm happy to have the conversation. And that conversation led to a number of conversations since then. And it helped me realize a couple things. So one, just the power of bringing this conversation to the forefront meant a lot to me personally. I've grown up with, as the son of an immigrant father, and emotions, feelings, all that kind of stuff was not in our vocabulary growing up, you know? And so having that initial conversation where he provided this safe space for me to have that conversation, in addition to sharing his perspective, was really powerful for me as an individual. Then the second thing was also the amount of strength that conversation provided me to want to move forward and take positive steps there. So I think it was a very meaningful thing that as we've had more conversations, we were figuring out, like, this is something that should be out there and more discussed. And Honolulu Tech Week was coming up, and we thought it was a perfect opportunity to bring this conversation to everybody here in this community. So thank you for indulging me on this little preamble here, but I thought it was meaningful to kind of like set the stage. And by way of introduction for Aaron, Aaron is a husband, he's a father, he's a 4-time founder. His most recent company is called Patient Circle. He's raised venture capital from some of the top VCs in the Valley. And he's an executive coach, advisor, doing so much good for the community. So with that, I'd love to call up Aaron Holm.
Thank you. And I'd like to just thank Joey for having this topic and covering this subject, because it's really important. So, you know, this may be the first tech conference that I know of that's raised this topic, and I think it should be at every tech conference. So hats off to you.
Hats off to Michael. Michael.
Still working.
Yeah, maybe we can start by just getting to know you a little bit here. And for anybody that is born and raised in Hawaii, getting to know another new person from Hawaii, there's one question that everybody always asks that person, and that question may be, What high school did you go to? It is the one thing that's like, I don't know, it's just so powerful. There's so much meaning behind this specific question. It's such an identifier, but maybe a version of that, since Aaron is visiting from Seattle, is tell me a little bit about high school Aaron. Like, where did you grow up?
High school Aaron was on fire. High school Aaron switched high schools because high school Aaron was involved in a lot of dodgy stuff and ended up at one school where there was a lot of violence that I wanted to get away from and go to another school where I could just anonymously get through the end of my high school days and get off to college.
What's the local high school that's like that? No, I'm just kidding.
No names, right?
Awesome. And maybe tell me a little bit more then about from your childhood to, like, what was the part of your upbringing that you felt really kind of identified with being an entrepreneur at that age?
Oof. Well, this is all the stuff that you find out in retrospect when you start looking, which is, obviously one of the big messages here is to, get to know yourself and be honest. I didn't know my dad growing up, so I grew up with a single mom, no money. We didn't have any money, so I grew up very much in an environment where didn't see a lot of options. So there didn't seem like there were a lot of different things that I could do. So I tried to figure out what could I do to support myself, and there was a short list of jobs that I saw in my neighborhood that people did to support themselves, and I thought that would be pretty much what I did. In high school, I went through a phase, there's this phenomenon with elephants. So when a father elephant is killed and the adolescent male elephants basically go insane. So they are violent and they are a mess, and a lot of it's because they don't have their father guidance. And so I went through a phase like that in a neighborhood where a lot of guys that I knew were in similar situations. And I think I was very lucky to walk the razor's edge and make it out of that. And I was the first one in my family to go to college. And I think what a lot of that did, though, was gave me sort of a somewhat skewed sense of risk. So I didn't think things were risky because I had seen what the potential worst possible outcomes looked like, and I knew them. So nothing about business or change or new ideas seemed particularly scary or risky. So it was always just, there was that. And then also I didn't seem to fit in anywhere. So making things and making my own path seemed to me like the only natural way to do it because I didn't seem to be able to fit into anything anybody else was doing.
Yeah, so tell me then about what was it like for starting your first company then? What was that company?
Yeah, the first one was out of necessity. So I got married and I was working. I did some funny jobs. I used to do sound engineering for Saturday morning cartoons. So I worked on cartoons like Care Bears and Little Bear and things like that. And then I was and then I was in broadcast technology for a while, which is a great training ground for technology because you have to deal with everything. You deal with satellite feeds and audio systems and video systems and early days of data systems, and it was really cool training ground. And then I got married and we decided we wanted to go somewhere warm. And so we decided to move to Miami, and a friend of mine had a software company and he said, I want to open up in the US. And so I went down and did that, and that was kind of the beginning of the end in terms of entrepreneurial, because I moved to Miami at the end of 2001 in a terrible economy. I didn't know anyone in the city. I'd never sold anything in my life, and I had to figure out how to make the business cash flow positive in 3 months. So that was like a trial by fire. Yeah.
So maybe we can start dipping in on the health stuff a little bit there. So maybe at that first company, like, what was your health like at that stage? In addition to, from a founder's perspective, what was your perspective on investing in your health at that stage?
So I was an athlete in college. I was a volleyball player, and I got diagnosed with a heart issue. And it was misdiagnosed, and I was given medication, and I had a reaction to medication. I ended up in the hospital. And then I was diagnosed with another condition, and I basically told the health system to go away for a long time. And so I had always had over my shoulder a genetic condition that I knew was either I was right and I was going to be able to exercise my way out of it, or everybody else was right and I was going to be dead before I was 40. So that was always hanging over me. So I tried in my 30s and 40s, until 46, I pushed really hard to be healthy physically. I had my first bout of burnout with the first company, and that was a shocker because it was literally physically debilitating, where I was so stressed that my body essentially shut down. And that's the first time when I said, okay, no matter what, I'm going to prioritize exercising every day. And so that's where I started some of these non-negotiables, where it's like, I can't live like this, so I have to build in exercise on a daily basis from the physical perspective. So I did that. That was the first sort of commitment I made like that.
And maybe even before that moment of realization, like your perspective was just grind and like that part will figure itself out, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I had a split perspective. On the one side, I was thought I was just doomed.
Yeah.
And so I thought I would do what I could, but it was very irrational. It was more of an emotional, like a rational person would have taken medication. But I was so stung from my medical experience that I just went into a very, very, limited mindset around what my options were. But physically, I was extremely in great shape, strong, and taking care of it from that side. But there was a disconnect, right? So the disconnect was sort of the mind, body, soul, right? Like my body was great, mind and soul were not well aligned.
And that was understood, like the disconnect between those three things was understood at that time, or
understood later.
Sure.
Yeah.
Got it. Maybe that's a good kind of segue into maybe real quick show of hands. How many people are founders or entrepreneurs here? Oh, awesome. Great. Like ICs or working at other companies. Cool. Okay, what's up, Ken? Awesome. And so maybe as kind of a segue into that, like, can you talk about maybe some of the misconceptions that you see from a founder's perspective on whether it's mental health, physical health, emotional health?
I think that there's a few. I think one of them is really fueled by the culture and the media, which is this notion of the solo entrepreneur who just grinds harder than anybody else and results in these massive accumulations of wealth and celebrity. So we idolize mostly men who are mostly in some ways, which I can relate with, come to entrepreneurialism because they're broken in some way or something was difficult. And so entrepreneurialism and starting a company in many ways can be a way to prove yourself, to prove your worth. Like, I'm worth something, I matter in this world, look at this incredible thing I'm building, look at how smart I am, right? That's a common motivation. So, that gets glorified a lot, and particularly in the Valley, there's a lot of this culture of, grinding. I don't think statistically it bears out that that's what creates wealth or successful companies, but I think that that's definitely part of the culture. And then I think founders often get into that mindset themselves where they believe or come to experience themselves as being all alone, right? So they have to figure it out. And it's understandable, right? You have to pitch to your investors, you have to motivate your team, you have to recruit people to come join the team, you have to build a category-leading product, you have to articulate it, you have to sell it, you have to do all these things. Yep. And so there's this perspective of, like, I have to do this, no one else can relate, and that can be a bit of a spiral, where the truth is, things are built together. People build things together. Relationships are made together. Investor relationships, the best investor relationships become friendships. I mean, there's an opportunity to learn and grow. And I think that that's the big thing with founders, is understanding that what'll get you there is not what got you to where you are now. And what's needed is a lot of growth and honesty and development.
Yeah, maybe double click on that from your perspective from that first or second company. Like, what was the biggest challenge for you in getting over that initial hurdle to prioritize something like this?
The second company was second company technically. We built this really cool company. We were, the back end of, as all this photography was going from analog to digital, we had figured out all the systems. So we had 30,000 square foot headquarters in Tribeca. We had studios in LA. We had offices in Brooklyn and Miami. And we were like the heartbeat of all major photo production for NBC and CBS, Showtime, Warner Brothers, Victoria's Secret, all of it. And I realized as we were, so we imagine we build out this data center. This is before AWS and before Azure. And if you wanted to have a SaaS system, you had to build your own infrastructure. So we had done all that. And then the recession hit in 2008, and that was really difficult because we were at a difficult point in our spending curve and our debt, and we had to grind it out and make it. And when we emerged, we were kind of like ahead of where anybody else had been. And then we sold the company to a private equity group. And I kind of realized as we were selling it, I was like, that was really hard. And we made a bunch of stuff that was beneficial for advertising teams. And I was like, and I realized that doing anything is hard. Yeah. Like anything, like opening a candy store is hard. And so I realized at that point, I really wanted to be intentional about what I picked, what I chose to do. Because I realized that I was good at some stuff and I could figure things out. And so it mattered what I brought that to. And that was a big shift at that moment. I was like, okay, well, I have to think harder about what the next thing that I start working on is.
All right, so let's fast forward over now to the next couple of companies. And
so there's a company after that. Yeah, there's a company that's still growing. We built this really cool consumer photo company called Mylio that's still growing. And then I spent a couple years at Amazon working on the founding team of the physical retail, so working on the cashierless grocery business and launching the first bookstore. And then I started Blockable. And Blockable was this crazy idea that in order to fix housing, you have to drive down cost, and the only way to drive down cost is to productize and manufacture. Much easier said than done. And that began an 8-year journey. We raised $35 million from some amazing investors, built out a really cool company, and then my heart freaked out.
Want to elaborate on that one? That's a big part of the story here.
So I'm out swimming. We're living on the lake. We're living in Seattle. We live on Lake Sammamish, and I've been having
leading up to this also. Like maybe where was your physical health leading up to this specific moment?
I mean, I thought it was okay. I thought I was getting older.
Yeah.
So I thought that these things that were happening in my chest over the last year as I was running and biking and continue to exercise were just me getting older. And so I pushed harder.
Yep.
And so I would run for a mile, and then my heart would do this, and I'd say, okay, I'll walk for a bit, and then I would run again, and then it would do it. Or if I was biking, but the thing when I was running is I could slow down and I could walk, and if I was biking, I could coast. And so I always had a remedy. And then we were living on the lake, and I went out for a swim one morning, and I was about a quarter mile from the shore, and it happened, and I couldn't fix it. And so I was in the water, and I was like, I'm going to die. I'm going to drown, and I'm going to die, and nobody knows that I'm out here. And so I had to get really calm really quickly, and I had to go on my back. I'd been, doing meditation for years, and I had to just go on my back and calm down. And I'd had a heart attack. They didn't find it until later, but I'd had a heart attack in the water. And I calmed myself down enough to get to shore. And when I got to shore, I was like, I have a problem. And that totally changed my trajectory, my relationship with healthcare and everything. Yeah.
I mean, it seems like there's a couple different like shock moments throughout that you've identified over a period of time. But obviously, facing something like that is so scary, and then also you're facing potentially something as traumatic as a death at that point, right? So
it is, but I'll tell you, I had the experience that most people had, which is I just sort of shut down, right? So when it happened, I think trauma is a really curious animal, and it shows up in life in a lot of ways. And when it happened to me, everything kind of turned into a movie. So I'm sort of in it, and I get back to shore, and I'm like, okay, I've got a big problem. I know what it is. Like, intuitively, I know. I haven't been told yet, and I haven't done the tests yet to reveal it. But now I've got to go do something I really don't want to do, because I always kind of knew what the answer was. So now I'm going to go to the cardiologist. He's going to tell me my levels, my cholesterol's over 400. I'm like, yeah, I know. Then they send me for the stress test. I have the same thing happen in a stress test. And then they send me for stents, and they go in my arm, and they look up, and they said, stents aren't going to work. You're going to need bypass surgery. And so within a month, I had a quintuple bypass. And that whole period, I learned later, I'm filling out my will. I'm making sure that all of my documents are in order. I've got 2 kids. I'm explaining to them what's happening. They're responding in very different ways. My son was 7, and I said, I'm having heart surgery. And he said, are you going to die? And I said, no. And he goes, okay. And my daughter, who was 13, I took her for lunch, and I said, I'm having heart surgery. It's going to happen. And she started to get very emotional. And I said, what are you worried about? And she said, I'm worried that you have cancer. I said, why would you be worried I have a cancer? Because her friend's dad had gone to the doctor, and they'd found cancer, and he was dead within a month. Wow. And so just going into the healthcare system, she was afraid that I would have cancer. And I told her, I said, if there's anything I know, it's right now I do not have cancer.
Right. So that is all happening in parallel to you running Blockable.
Oh, I go to my board, and I'm explaining, Mitch Capor, Jason Gallicanis, YB from Vulcan. I'm talking to them and saying I'm going to be out, and I'll be out for 2 weeks is the way I described it. I'll be out for 2 weeks. I'll be back, no problem.
Founding CEO role.
So I'll be back, and it was Mitch Capor. He told me on the phone. He was like, "Are you aware of the how frequent heart surgery patients develop depression?" And I was like, "No." And because he had his own sort of heart issues, and he was sharing with me. Sure. It was cool. At that moment, everyone became a friend, interested in me personally, not interested in me as the CEO. It was very, very supportive. But what I had gone into at that point was I was doing stuff that I had learned to do when I was young, which is if there's a difficult thing, I'm just going to go at it really hard. I'm going to perform. I'm going to ace my recovery. I'm going to be back in work, and I'm going to put this whole thing behind me. And so that was that's the way that I repressed my experience going through surgery. Yeah.
So, there's physical things happening right now. There's tons of emotional things with different people in your life, whether it was, you talked about your kids, your wife, your board. How did you even manage the emotional side of this, let alone the physical side of this?
At the time, I don't think I fully experienced it.
Yeah.
At the time, I think what I did is I performed like I knew how to perform. So I knew what needed to be done, and I compartmentalized all of my emotions about it, and I didn't let any of them into anything that I was doing, and I just went through the steps.
Yep. And looking back at that,
it was a step towards me understanding myself at a level of depth that I had never been anywhere near before.
Sure.
Which came out of what happened after. Yeah. Which was, I went through the recovery, I went through rehab, I did all the things I was supposed to do, and it wasn't getting better. I didn't know I had had a heart attack at that point. They had never caught it. So 2 years later, I'm telling my cardiologist, I'm just like, it's not coming back. I don't know what the issue is. I can't do things I used to do. I don't have energy. It's really, I've tried everything. I've changed my meds. I've changed my diet. At this point, I'm full vegan. I'm exercising all the time. And I've got my numbers under control. I take injections every 2 weeks. And so all the things that I can do to get under control, but I don't feel good. And they do a nuclear imaging test, and they're like, oh, you had a heart attack and your heart's scarred, and it'll be scarred forever. And so I was like, and I couldn't do anything about that. Oh. There's nothing, I couldn't power my way through that.
Yep.
I couldn't perform my way out of that. It just was. And so we're out raising another round of capital, and I'm depressed. I'm fully there's a state that you can get into with chronic illness, which is, it's waiting to die, where you're like, I don't know. I'm waiting. It's going to happen. I'm just kind of in this stage where I'm waiting to die. And it's a dark place. But I had a really good coach and a spiritual teacher, and she was like, you're in your dark night of the soul. And I said, okay. How long does that last? And she said, months, years. I was like, okay. And she said, just don't look away. She said, just experience everything. She said, you haven't experienced it. You've had trauma your whole life. You haven't experienced any of it. She said, just don't look away. And so I did, and I wept, and I had darkness, and I performed my role as a CEO, and we went to raise capital, we raised money, and then I got into bed and I pulled the covers over, and I just could not wait to be asleep again, I didn't want to get up in the morning, and I would just wake up with this endless list of tasks that I had to do with no idea of how the hell I was going to get any of them done. And then I would just go, and then I would just wait to get back into bed, kids, family, the whole bit. Yeah. And then one day it just lifted. And so then I became fascinated with what had happened and how it had worked. Yeah. And so one day I woke up and I was like, oh, I'm alive. This is okay, great. I'm not dead. This is good. I can be alive. I can probably live longer. This is great. It was just, I have no explanation other than things looked different.
Yeah. Yeah. And at that time, talk about maybe that's you as an individual going through that experience. What was it like with the people around you as well?
Oh, no one knew anything.
You weren't.
I had a total poker face about everything.
Yeah.
I will not let anyone near me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my modus operandi. I can convince anybody that I'm okay, not okay, whatever it is I need to convince people. Is a skill that I learned growing up, where I just needed to morph into different situations and be able to do it. So no one around me other than my coach knew that I was going through this. And then when I came out of it, I think people were confused with who this was that was showing up that suddenly seemed a lot happier.
Sure.
Yeah, a little more easygoing. Yeah.
Got it. So maybe you can then talk about post-blockable, what happened after that as you started to kind of investigate this. That was kind of your moment of shock, essentially, to prioritize this, or was there another moment after that made you really realize that?
The first moment was when we sold the company in New York and made a bunch of money and then was starting a new thing, and everything on paper looked like everything I thought that I was supposed to be doing, and it was terrible. I was in a terrible place, and my wife and I were in a rough patch, and we started going to a counselor, and that counselor turned out to be a Buddhist teacher who turned out to be a coach, which led me down suddenly this path of kind of learning more about how I operate, who I am, my assumptions, my belief systems, all that stuff. So that was the first aha moment, which was I was on paper, everything was going exactly as I had set up and wanted it to go, and it was terrible, and I was miserable. And I had no idea why, and I didn't enjoy anything. There was nothing I could think of that I would enjoy if I went and did.
Yeah.
And so that was the first one. And then the second one was waking up after the depression, after years after surgery, and just becoming and feeling my nervous system change. So feeling my nervous system recalibrate itself because I had just cleared deep, deep, deep trauma. And it was not a plan to do that. It's just I had good guidance and good coaching and good teaching, and so that's what happened.
Sure.
And then I just became fascinated with it and started to see places where it could be deployed. So the entrepreneur hat starts kicking in, and I'm wait a second, how is it? These things just started to seem crazy to me. So I started to get really involved with heart surgery patients, and I was like, how is it? This is a scheduled trauma. It's coming every time. There's 50 million major surgeries in the US every year, and every one of them is a scheduled trauma, and we do not treat it like that. And how is it that every surgery patient goes into surgery and doesn't talk to anybody who's been through it, the only people who they can relate with? Nobody talks to anybody who's been through it. I'm just how the hell is this possible? So then I started just going down the path, and I started doing a research project with my hospital, and I said, let me coach some patients before they go into surgery, and I guarantee you it'll change their rates of anxiety and depression, and I guarantee you they'll go to rehab. Yep. And if you do those things, then you change all the cost metrics and all the depression metrics. And I said, I know it'll work. And somehow they listened, and so they did, and we did the study, and now it's turning into a thing.
Oh. Yeah. And how long is this, from first company till essentially right now?
That is all in 20 years. From the episode I was talking about with depression and then coming out of that, that's a year and a half, not that long. Yep. So it's not that long ago that all happened. But then I started to study it and started to see that this is actually, over the last 20 years, our understanding of how trauma works, our understanding of how to clear trauma, and our understanding of neuroplasticity have all been well studied.
Yeah.
So you can learn, there's things out there about how it works. Basically, it's similar to, we all have trauma. Everybody has trauma from different parts of their life, and we all deal with it in different ways. It's similar, the analogy I use is like if you're bit by a dog when you're a kid, then you see a dog when you're older, and the dog might be fine, but you get scared. Your nervous system kicks in. You go into fight or flight mode. It's not because of what's happening, but it's because of what your mind is telling your body as to what's happening. Your body only exists in the present moment. Your mind can convince your body that all kinds of different things are happening. If you clear the trauma, it's just a dog. It's the same dog, right? But your reality first was, that dog's scary, I need to protect myself, my nervous system kicks in. Now, if my nervous system stays kicked in, that's chronic stress. If I can clear the original trauma that I was bit by a dog when I was a kid, but I didn't allow myself to experience it then, so it's stored.
Yeah.
If I can clear that, then when I see the dog when I'm older, it's just a dog. It's not scary. My nervous system doesn't think it's got to tell my body to freak out.
Yeah. You talk about, get into whatever level of detail on that as possible, but like the perspective from you and kind of some of the things that happened in your upbringing that led to how you addressed essentially managing some of that stress, that chronic stress, like shutting people out or kind of grinding through that. Like, are there things that specifically that you have realized that have enabled those habits that now you've worked through?
I mean, I grew up very much, I raised myself, so like there was no one around when I was a kid. Yep. And so my belief was there was no one to talk to, there was no one that could help, and so I would have to figure things out. And it was formed at a very young age, so there wasn't really any judgment around it. It wasn't like this is good or this is bad, it's just how I learned to operate. And then I never dug back in and started to question some of my beliefs around that. A lot of times what happens with people is you form behaviors and patterns when you're a child out of survival, whatever that means. Like people look to their parents to provide them security or provide them different things. And when you're a child, you develop behaviors as a way to protect yourself and as a way to be safe.
Yeah.
When you become an adult, you don't need those anymore, but you don't necessarily know that you don't need those. And so those then become baked into, really complex, deeply embedded patterns of behavior that we all have. So like if you're a founder and, you go and you want to meet with an investor and then suddenly the investor becomes your dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so you get all weird because you're trying to raise money from someone that's not your dad. You know what I mean? But to you, this authority figure who holds the keys to you getting something that you want, right, represents your father. So I forget the question, honestly.
No. In this, maybe from a founder perspective, since we have so many founders here, it's like going back and reflecting on your personal experience. There's been 20 years of work that's been put into this for you. How would you go back and address or reprioritize your own personal, mental, emotional, physical health while starting this next company? I mean, as young as you can possibly get to know yourself better is the best thing that you can do. And not in my experience is you cannot do it alone. People try to so I like the thing I'm probably most proud of in the world is that I broke a generational pattern of absent fathers. Right? So my father wasn't there, his father wasn't there. I don't think his father was there. I've just dropped my daughter off at college 3 weeks ago. I've got a son who's 13. I've loved being a father. And that generational pattern, it took a lot of work and a lot of effort. My father knew that he'd been very impacted by him not having a father around. And he spent his life trying to read his way and think his way out of it. And the mind can't fix it. You can't fix things like that intellectually. It has to happen in the body. It has to happen at a very different level. And so my advice to everybody is, the younger that you can go on that journey to really understand who you are and how you work, and to get support with that, whatever that means, the better. There's nothing that doesn't improve. It's like your work gets better. You'll be a better parent. You'll be a better person. You'll be more loving. You'll be more open. I mean, these are just good things to do. Yeah. Can you speak to there's the hustle culture that's out there, and the hustle culture that's out there that I think a lot of the founders here are probably familiar with. And now you have this brand new perspective. Like, as you're starting this next company, and you can maybe speak a little bit about the new company that you're starting as well, but like, how do you bring that level of intentionality to you as a founder in the founder role, but then also, like, what opportunity do you see in creating more of that intentional culture within your company and the success it may have for you?
Well, I do a couple things now, and they're mostly out of things that I know how to do, and I'd like to use them in ways that are beneficial. So I coach founders and heart patients. So I've been through the heart surgery journey, and I know that coaching helps heart patients and is really successful. So I do that. And I coach founders also because I've been in their shoes and I can really help them in those experiences. I do advisory for housing companies that are trying to fix affordable housing, so that's consulting. And then I started a company called Patient Circle, which is meant to close that loop of people going through major surgery and not talking to people who have been through it. So it provides community, education, and peer coaching. And it's a mix of creating all the research that's necessary to show the benefits so that it has a benefit on reducing anxiety and depression, reducing costs, increasing rehab rates, reducing hospitalizations, reducing hospital time visits, all the things that get measured. So there's a bunch of research that we're doing, which is just, over time, takes time. And then there's a community that's growing that we're building and, opening up and going to new cardiac surgery clinics and making it available. And so that's just, growing a thing. So I think that I work as hard as I ever have. It's different. So I think a lot of it's about balance. It's fine to work hard. It's fine to really put yourself into something. It's fine to commit. It's fine to have beautiful ideas. It's also really important to know why you're doing it and to balance that with being a complete whole person, right? So everybody here is, creative, resourceful, and whole. Like, we all have that at our core. And then that gets muddied by a lot of confusion. And so hustle culture is an idea, but it's just an idea, right? So it's an idea that you can make something out of, make nothing out of, you can take it, you can leave it. It doesn't really matter, it's just a label. It's different, for me, the idea of hustle culture is very different than the idea of being committed, working, really putting yourself into something, really wanting to see a vision come true. I mean, we were talking about it earlier. The thing about entrepreneurs is you see things that other people don't see yet. That's the whole point of it. You see something, you kind of can't believe that everybody doesn't see it, but you see it. You're like, and sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not, but you see something and you go after it. And that's what's different about entrepreneurs, for whatever reason, however it is that we're wired. You see something and it's beautiful to go after it. And then underneath that, there's the question, Steve March, who is does a lot of coaching training, has this great idea, which is for the sake of what? So to go after that for the sake of what? What happens if you're right? What changes? If you, that was my first realization with one of the first companies, just like, okay, well, what did all that work? What did we just, other than money, right? What did we just create? And that's the big question. It's like, if that works, okay, for what? For the sake of what?
Yeah. Have you thought, as you're building this out now, and specifically with Patient Circle, there's a ton of work that you have been doing for yourself as a founder, but also now you have to think about growing a team and building that as part of your culture. Like, are there mechanisms or tools that you're thinking about trying to embed into your organization to ensure that this is something that is a healthy and sustainable culture for you?
I think the biggest one, and the one that I've told my CTO, I said the single biggest thing is honesty. Just core splitting honesty. No matter how difficult it seems or like what you think might happen or the good or the bad, just honesty. And so that's something that has to kind of start within. You have to be able to be honest with yourself. That's the big one. And then I'm also doing some different stuff with this one, where one of the things I'm doing is looking much more at attraction rather than forcing things. So I used to have very much a mindset of like, I can plow and I can just make things happen and I'm just gonna like get, bulldoze everything and make it true.
Yep.
And this time I'm like, well, this is where this is gonna go and I'm gonna put it out there and we're gonna see So that's how the CTO came because he saw, I put it out there on this Discord thing that I'm involved with, which a bunch of people who are interested in Buddhism, right? And they're like, is anybody working on new things? And I was like, yeah, I'm working on this thing. And the CTO said, I've been caring for my nephew and my father, both who had heart surgery over the last 6 months. And this really speaks to me, and I want to work with you on this, and I'm an AI engineer.
Yep.
I said, okay, that's good. And so now, and also like in that interaction, I've also reached a point now where, giving him a whole space to work from and not trying to force my ideas about how everything needs to be is also a bit of a different approach with it. And it's really fulfilling and going in places that I never would have been able to predict, and has much more to do with what I was talking about before, which is the idea that you can't do it yourself. It has to be people coming together to do things.
How do you bring that also intentionality into you as you're building a company, venture backable company, expanding that also and finding alignment with other stakeholders that you need to grow a successful business as well? So you think about the pressures that a typical VC may have, maybe not aligned at all to something like this. And I haven't heard too many VCs speak about this specific topic, but.
Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, investors are interesting because there's karma with investors. There's no two ways about it. Every investor that I've ever dealt with, I've sat down in a room with a room full of investors, and I was like, I don't know, should I even pitch? It's like we're clearly not, we're not getting together. And then there are other investors where it's just instant. You see something, you're like, there's a connection, it's energetic. And when building something like this, there's also, the thing I like about it is you can do two things. You can ease suffering and you can lower costs. So I love models where capitalism can be put to work. You put capitalism to work, people make money. Nothing wrong with it. They should. People should make lots of money. The money's not the problem. Money is just energy. So it's good. You have to figure out, and in our model, there's a for-profit model, a not-for-profit model. In the research world, this is a not-for-profit world. When you're dealing with research, when you're going after things like that, that's not a commercial for-profit activity. You're developing IP, but it gets held slightly differently. So the question is, how do you structure something that's for-profit and not-for-profit? Where do different activities go? And how do you put it in place? Because on the for-profit side, if you can, as one of our early mentors told me, he's like, if you shave a half a day off a patient visit, you pay for this entire thing many times over to the healthcare system. And so we're talking about if we can make a material difference, there's numbers. Like if you move, right now, 80% of heart surgery patients are referred to cardiac rehab and less than 20% go. For a whole bunch of reasons. If you move the number from 20% to 80%, you save 15,000 lives and 185,000 hospitalizations a year. Like, that's been studied. So great, now that's a number, you can do something about that. If you reduce rates of depression and anxiety, if that has an impact on 30-day hospital revisits, that has an impact on 30-day emergency room visits, all of those have numbers attached to them. So the trick with this particular business is, how do you move it from something that is an out there idea that nobody's ever done, which is patients coaching other patients? How do you move that from something that is a standard of care and that's covered by insurance and every patient gets it?
I think we are, whatever, time check. Okay. Okay, so, cool. Okay, cool. Maybe to kind of wrap up this portion, and then I think I would love to have a little bit more of a discussion with the audience and the different founders that are here as well. But maybe if there is a takeaway, you're talking about encouraging founders to identify themselves. But if there's a specific tactical piece of advice, like how would you advise people to go out and do that?
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of coaching, mostly because that's what helped me. So what helped me, I can tell you, if I hadn't, I've had a coach for 13 years. My coach is also a Tibetan Buddhist student and teacher. So I've been to northern India with my coaches and learned from my coach's teacher. So there's a very pure lineage. There's a lot of different things called coaching out there. So, it's just something that you have to kind of discern. I'm a big fan of it because I know that it helped me be alive, which is probably not the degree that you guys have to consider, the implications. But, it's something I don't know how you do it alone. I don't know how you don't do it. It doesn't happen with books. You can't read your way through it. At some point, you have to really take an honest examination of who you are and what you do. And the truth is, everybody, we're not who we think we are, right? So we all have this idea of who we are, which is an idea. And when you start to question that idea, all kinds of things can happen. That's where the growth is. So when you're building a company, the person who successfully builds the company is not the person who starts the company, right? Those are like different. You grow and you learn, and it's all very beautiful. But you have to. It's all challenging, and there's a lot to it. But you can embrace it. But trying to do it all yourself is just damaging, I think.
Yep. All right. Yeah, I think we're going to open up for some questions, but also you were thinking about maybe if you have any questions for the audience as well. But maybe we'll kick it off. Did you have a question here?
Yeah. Aloha. Mahalo nui for sharing your story. First things first, I have to say, the coaching absolutely changed my life through a lot of mental health. And so I think, I really align with what you were sharing and that advice, so spot on there. My question is you spoke about how you were having some of these health traumas in your life, which seemed to maybe have happened during hobbies, sporting in college, and different things that you like to do. What was your professional lifestyle as a founder of many different companies, and what were the elements that maybe contributed to your mental or physical health from a professional setting? Like being a founder, you noticed maybe you were working 90 hours a week, or you weren't sleeping as much, or what elements come with, I guess, finding a company or running a business that maybe you saw later played a huge impact in your mental and physical health?
Stop drinking.
That's a good one.
For me, that was if I were to... So as you get older, the margins tend to get slimmer, right? So things you might have been able to tolerate before become more difficult to tolerate. Through my life, from a very early age, way too young I could share it, but was drinking. So the way that I coped, and the way that I was social, and the way that I shoved things down emotionally, and the way that I repressed was to drink. And that was the thing for me, which was to, first of all, to get honest about it, and then to do something about it, which is not easy. Yep. Does that answer your question? So it's a somewhat simplistic answer, but yeah.
Thank you. I quit drinking.
Hey, good for you.
My name is Fidei. I'm a filmmaker, I'm just getting into tech. I developed a web application that will become an application, and we go into beta in 2 weeks. But I really identified with what you said about going under your covers and just disappearing from the world. I started this marketing company 2 months ago to help local businesses with their social media, and I guess as a filmmaker, I've always been an entrepreneur because independent filmmaking is basically entrepreneurial. And now I've started this app, which is like a food sharing app. And I guess my question is I have 2 children, married, mortgage, the whole thing. And for the last month, it's I have these 3 companies, and I have these kids, and I have and it's just I do feel like I'm all alone sometimes, and for the last month I've woken up it feels like there's an elephant standing on my chest or something. I feel, and I don't hide it from my wife as much, even though I guess that's a thing too. It could be a toxic masculinity thing. I don't tell my father ever. I don't really tell my friends, and I try not to tell my wife. And has anybody video viewing. I try not to tell my wife because I'm supposed to be the man. I'm supposed to be the guy, right? But lately I have told her, like, I'm just like, I don't know, I'm fucking depressed or something. Like, and I think a lot of it just comes from like, I'm in like an ADHD sort of like addict, right? So like I'm always, and that's kind of, and like you said, I saw this problem with the world and I see a solution to it. And so I was like, well, I have to do it. It's so obvious to me, but I guess maybe I've just taken on a lot. And I just wonder, like, what would your advice, you might have already said, so forgive me if you already said that, but like, what would be your advice to like, I don't know, my whole thing is I want to change the world and make it a better place. But sometimes with that, I feel like that comedian, like the comedian that's making people laugh all the time, and then when he goes home by himself, he's just like, wants to kill himself. I don't know.
Well, I'd say three things. I don't know if we have time for the third. So the first thing is, the world's okay, right? The world doesn't need to get changed. It can change, maybe not. That's one thing to just think about. And the other one is like, what if nothing's wrong with you? Like, what if there's no, like, what if you're totally fine? It's just something to consider. And there's a third one. Do we have time for like that?
Yeah, you have time.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody want to indulge? I'll teach you a breathing exercise if you want. So this is a hack. This is a total, like, people talk about like growth hacks and stuff. This is like a nervous system hack. So, all right, so everybody sit up. You want to straighten your back, and you want to slightly tuck your chin, and you're looking to align the top of your crown to your tailbone. The reason is you want to have a free flow of energy, free flow of breath. And so I'd invite everybody to close your eyes and just take a moment and bring your attention to your breath. So bring your attention to your inhale and your exhale. If a thought comes to your mind, it's not a problem. You just observe it like it's a cloud in the sky and let it pass by. Just curiously, just observing it. Just allow yourself to notice and bring your attention to your breathing. Maybe the first moment you've had today to just quiet down. There's nowhere else to be, there's nothing else to do. And just notice how it feels to bring your attention to your breathing. And then when you're ready, I invite you to take a deep breath in, completely filling your lungs with air. Breathe every last bit of air that you can. Breathe all the way up to the top, and then pause for a moment and just observe the quiet. And when you exhale for a full 7 seconds. Very slowly push all of the air out of your lungs and let any tension and anxiety fall away. Just let it drop away. Fully empty your lungs of air. And then another breath in, completely filling your lungs with air, and again, breathing in light, and at the top, pause for a moment, just experience space. And then slowly exhale a full 7 seconds, release any tension and anxiety, just let it fall away. And then a third time, completely filling your lungs with air, breathing in love and light, pausing at the top, noticing quiet, and slowly release all the air out of your lungs for a full 7 seconds. Let any last bits of anxiety and tension fall away. And then just take a moment here and bring your attention back to your breathing. Just notice how it feels. Focusing on the inhale and the exhale. Just notice how it feels to be quiet. And then when you're ready, just gently open your eyes, come back into the room, and you might look around, notice that you're back in a real space. And so, how was that? Was it good?
That was awesome.
So, what you did, essentially, if you can breathe out for 7 seconds, it means you're not being chased by a lion. And so, Your sympathetic nervous system just got a break. When you're in chronic stress, when you're always worried about stuff, your sympathetic nervous system's working overtime. It's very tiring. And so that's a trick you can do anytime, and it'll bring you your parasympathetic nervous system back online, and it's just immediately relaxing. Your body knows how to do it.
I think that was the perfect way to close this session. So Aaron, I genuinely really appreciate you flying all the way out here, spending the time with this community here. I think Aaron's going to be here for a little bit as well, but thank you all for also joining this specific conversation. And I think if you could give one more round of applause, Aaron Holm. Thank you, everyone.